All righty, it's that time of evening. Good evening, Leon. How are you?
I am all right. I literally just raced home to be here so I can do this with you. With you
So
guys.
this is we're not too bad. Welcome to our new subscribers, current and viewers. This is Cat Space. Tonight's topic, we are going to be looking into what is happening around Australia. For those from overseas, Australia, we are currently going through what the world is going through with this pandemic, with Omicron, and with our federal election coming up. So I have a quote from news.com.au in regards to our Prime Minister talking about the virus while he was at the cricket, saying, but this is Australia living with the virus. Look at out there, and Australia is taking wickets in this virus. Another blunder by the Prime Minister. First question, is Scott Morrison out of touch with Australia and the Australian people?
Oh, God, yes. That's like a no-brainer. I don't think he's just out of touch with the Australian people. I think he's out of touch with the world, basically. The fact that, Joe Biden named him this guy from down under instead of saying Prime Minister Scott Morrison is an example of how out of touch he is with not just Australia, but the world. And to use cricket as a means to basically demonstrate how much we've failed the COVID pandemic is probably not the best of times to talk about COVID, especially when people are trying to, get back into the spirit of working and whatnot and just get out of sickness.
What do you think, Leon?
To be honest, I think the way that he's handled it right now has been incorrect. The way he's handled has not been the right way. I mean, when he came up on the cricket, as you guys mentioned, it was during the pink test just recently, but at the same time that he was talking about, he was talking about Omicron and all that sort of stuff, Dominic Perrottet was actually holding his own press conference in Sydney regarding, how they're gonna handle these changes and stuff like that are coming through. I believe it was the changes. Yeah, it was. So they were shutting down basically music and dancing and all that sort of stuff, karaoke and stuff like that until at least the 28th of January. While Dominic Perrottet was having that particular press conference, that was when Scott Morrison was actually on air on Fox Cricket talking about how Australia is dealing with this stuff. It was bad timing. It was horrible timing, to be perfectly honest. I don't think he should have done that, to be honest. He should have been it's easy to talk about hindsight, but I think in hindsight, he probably should have been with Dominic Perrottet this time around, so he can explain what's going on while they're all there. I mean, talk about Dominic Perrottet, Kerry Chant was at this press conference as well. Scott Morrison really should have been there at the same time, but the way he's handled this has not been right. Even now where we've got the shortages of the rat tests, I know they're supposed to be coming in, but they're supposed to come in. They should have been in. They should have been in months ago, I believe, in the UK while he was over there in the UK. They were doing the rat tests on a daily basis. And even some politicians just today, I believe, they've been handed their free rat tests, and they were on Twitter today, saying that they're going to donate it to the community council or community whatever you call it, the nursing homes with their electorates and stuff like that, because they shouldn't have got it first. We should have been distributed evenly as far as the rat tests are concerned. But as you mentioned, the federal election is coming up, I believe, this year. And if it comes down to Western Australia, the LNP are going to be screwed because Mark McGowan is the only one who has really handled the coronavirus anywhere decently. And I'm just check out his numbers here today. Just if I may, just give me a moment here while I'm talking. He has handled it better than any other state right now. And as I'm looking at the cases right now. Western Australia had, I'll go through this real quickly on today's cases. Total act. Can I go through this active or just can I go through this statewide? All right, so we'll just go through statewide just for this is from COVID Live. Active cases: New South Wales I know these numbers are going to sound 20K different because of it's just, I'm assuming this is because of the recoveries as well. So this is what I'm going with here. New South Wales active cases are up 17,450. That even though it was like 35 today, but I'm assuming there's another 20K that have recovered or something. Victoria, 38,346 active or newer active cases right now. Queensland, 49,366. Somehow that got worse than New South Wales and Victoria combined, just about. South Australia was at 1,679. The ACT's numbers came down 701, which is nice to know. Tasmania is up by 408. Northern Territory up 192. Western Australia up 3.
Wow.
Which gives you an overall Australia-wide total new active cases today of 106,743, with Queensland being the worst, Victoria the second, and New South Wales in third. But Western Australia active cases went up by only 3.
Yeah. So
and if it comes down to the federal election, Mark McGowan's the Labor member.
Now, this is what I think. Can you hear me clearly? Okay.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. This is what I think. Is our Prime Minister out of touch with Australia and the Australian people? My answer to that is yes, absolutely 100%. And this is the reason why. I believe he's out of touch because when the bushfires happened, for example, let's go back a fair bit. When the bushfires happened, he was nowhere to be found. He was in Hawaii. When Melbourne earthquake happened, he was in America. Now, when we needed him most, when it comes down to Omicron, where was he? At 2 different locations. First, he was at Mount Panorama, having a test ride with a friend of his in the car. Second of all, at the cricket. And it's kind of, and this is only my opinion, I'm not here to, offend anyone, but the thing is, as an opinion, it's that I feel when we need him the most, he's missing in action. He's not a prime minister. He doesn't check in. He's out of touch. He's out of date. And it kind of feels like he's given up on us, on all of us as a country. And the fact that he recently was a close contact, and instead of isolating, he didn't have to isolate. And he just went about his business doing press conferences and going here and going there. Well, if you're a close contact, even though you're able to do you're not able to do certain things. But the thing is he out of touch? Absolutely. I mean, he's a parent. You'd think he was with the country, with us all together, but he's out of touch.
I just, before you say that, I really don't understand how Scott Morrison, who was known to be a close contact, who was probably being told by his advisors, look, you need to go into isolation, could then basically just say, yeah, I'm a close contact, but tomorrow I'm just going to the cricket. And he could have basically infected pretty much everyone on the Australian cricket team, which I find amazing, to be honest.
I can assume he would have taken a rat test, and I'm assuming he would have taken a rat test, and that rat test would have come back negative. Now, you can't blame Scott Morrison for not being in Victoria because of an earthquake. You mentioned an earthquake there. You can't blame him for an earthquake, okay? But given the lefties, they'll probably blame him for setting the southern hemisphere on fire or some crap. But you're right about that. He was in the wrong place. He was in Hawaii or whatever it is on a holiday when we had the fires. But I'm not counting the fires now because the fires were before the pandemic. So I'm already discarding that. I'd
like to basically point out that I know you're putting the fires behind you, and I know this is strictly COVID, but it's pretty more to do with the actions that the Prime Minister has been taking. Like, for example, when we had the fires, for some reason, Scott Morrison didn't, when he was asked by the Americans to say, hey, we've got these volunteers that are happy to put out the fires in Australia with using American firefighters, he actually refused to let them in. Now, was that because he didn't want Americans fighting Australian firefighters?
Didn't he let Canadians in to help fight the fire? I think he did, but I'm not sure about Americans.
Yes, but since, is this thing on? Since,
Yes, it is.
since we're talking
I'm
about
not going to hear.
COVID, yes, I'm not blaming him for the Melbourne earthquake, but what I'm saying is he's not just the prime minister for the states, he's a prime minister for the country, the entire country, which means he's in charge of everything.
But
And he
there's
should be running everything. He shouldn't have to leave it to the state premiers to do all the work themselves. And he's going, look, I don't hold a hose, not my responsibility. This isn't my issue or my problem to deal with. It's completely, askew to me. And
well, the thing is, there are laws within Australia for which is entirely governed by the states. But that doesn't mean that the Prime Minister can't work with the states. That's his job, is to work with the states to ensure that the states can provide to its people. But when he says, oh, it's not my problem, this is a state issue, let's just get the states to deal with it. That's like,
It is his problem. It is Scott
it's his
Morrison's
because
problem.
people come to him for answers to go, okay, why aren't, if the states aren't following through, then we have to go to someone above the state, which is the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister basically has to pull some weight and go, hang on, you guys are meant to be basically looking after your people and you're not. So I'll move in and make sure that you're pulling your weight. Because otherwise he can just go, well, you're not doing your job as ministers, and therefore I have the power to sack you.
I don't think, to be honest, I actually don't believe that the Prime Minister has the power to sack state government. I believe that is the Governor General's responsibility. I believe the Governor General has that power to strip a state of their leader. I believe I think it's the same way. I think it's the same way as the government as well. So I
think how it works is the Governor General has the right to fire the Prime Minister of Australia, but the Prime Minister has the right to do a seat shuffle. So if they want to make ministers backbenchers, for example, he has the right to do so. So he does have responsibility. He can't just say, I don't hold a hose to it, even though he has said that. He does have responsibility. Otherwise, his job in Australia is pretty much pointless, basically. I
think his job in Australia right now is pointless because he's trying to direct all these state leaders, and the state leaders are pretty much going, well, if they're doing it their own way, and currently the only state leader that's actually handling this pretty much the right way is Mark McGowan over there in Western Australia. I've just actually got an updated list on the Western Australia daily cases because I was actually reading the active cases from another area. In the last week, from between the 6th of January through to the 12th of January, they had 54 new cases. That's the week in Western Australia, and they had 6 cases today. So they're handling it so much better than all the other states because the other states are now in the hundreds and in the thousands, and in Australia and in New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland states, the tens of thousands.
So tell me, what is Western Australia doing right that every other state is doing wrong?
Lockdown entrances to the other states. And even I believe as of today, if I can just go to Twitter, I believe Mark McGowan actually did put all the other states on an extreme risk. So just bear with me, please, for a second. Bless you. Mark McGowan. I'm looking this. This is live on Twitter, by the way. I'm just looking at this on live on Twitter. If I can read this out, here we go. Based on the latest, this is from Mark McGowan's own Twitter feed right now. Based on the latest health advice, the Northern Territory will be elevated to extreme risk category from 12:01 Thursday to 13th of January. So that's from 12:01 Thursday to 13th of January, but he's put all of the states, that's the Northern Territory, Queensland, New South Wales, ACT, Victoria, Tasmania, and also South Australia as extreme risk, which means you would have to you would be required to be tested for COVID-19 within 24 hours of arrival and the days 5 and 13, and undertake the 12 days of quarantine at a state facility at your own expense. So if you want to go to West Australia, you're going to have to pay for your own hotel quarantine and also your tests.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the next question I want to throw out. Who's handled COVID better, Scott Morrison or the state premiers?
To be honest, I think some of the state premiers have done a better job, but it depends which state premier you're talking about. So for New South Wales, I think that Gladys Berejiklian has actually done it the best. Although the Tasmanian premier has the least amount of cases, but Tasmania is kind of different because it's an island, and so it can block people out and people aren't willing to travel there and whatever. But Gladys was probably doing it the best. Perrottet's probably done it the worst out of all of them.
What
But
about Daniel Andrews?
see, well, this is the thing about Daniel
Ooh.
Andrews. A lot of people hate Daniel Andrews and they see him as a dictator and whatever. And I can see why they see him as a dictator. But the only reason why Melbourne basically kept spreading coronavirus is because they kept having freaking protests all the time, whereas New South Wales had one protest and then everyone went home because they realized
No.
that
No, New South Wales had heaps of protests. There's a lot of them went
They
under
did
the
not have
went under the radar,
He's right, yeah,
and
he did.
and the police were on hand to snuff out the protesters because
He's right.
at that stage, Gladys Berejiklian, I think, pretty much instructed the police. You know, if these guys are going to have their protests, these guys are going to be rounded up and
Well, hang on, there was the one where
counsel quickly.
the police, wasn't it the police horse got punched, wasn't it? That was that
I think that was in Victoria, wasn't it? I believe that was a Victorian one.
Well,
I think
if you look at comparison between the protests, the legal protests in New South Wales compared to, say, Melbourne or Victoria, Victoria's had way more. They had like a protest every week, you know.
Surprised there's no protest this weekend. If there is any, I'm not encouraging anybody to go to it because you're just doing yourself a disservice and you're doing your state a disservice.
But I think when it comes to Perrottet, I mean, I know that he's thought, hey, I'm going to make myself popular by giving everyone their freedom back. But he also shut down all the services, or most, if not all of the, COVID services to check whether we had COVID or not. And it's almost impossible to get a rat test in New South Wales. So I think he's doing really a pathetic job at the moment. I'm really, for New South Wales to have one of the best roadmaps in the country, to have the worst roadmap in the country is absolutely crazy.
Okay, here's where I look at this question. Who's handled it better, our Prime Minister or the state premiers? My answer, Mark McGowan's handled it beautifully, on time and on spot on. The thing is, we had Gladys Berejiklian. Not many of us agreed with her choices. Not many of us liked her policies or liked her as a premier. Okay, but we got Dominic Perrottet. Here's the thing. A young guy with a family, right? Young guy with a family. He came in and I'm like, well, give him a chance. Let him dive into the job. He's got big shoes to fill. Let's see how he handles it. At first, he handled it nicely. He gave us our freedoms back. We went about our business. Life went on. And now the numbers are skyrocketing. Is he handling this beautifully? Absolutely not. If I could look at Dominic Perrottet, I would look at him and say, Mr. Perrottet, our numbers are skyrocketing. I know you don't want to look at lockdowns or the expense of lockdowns because businesses need to boom. Money needs to be paid to, rent and buildings and whatnot. But, our numbers are fluctuating like a yo-yo. I'm asking you, please think about, if you don't want to lock down businesses, lock down homes, because you can still do takeaway. And, not many people want to lose their businesses, which I totally respect and understand. But the thing is, we do need a lockdown, perhaps. And many people I've heard have unofficially, quote, locked down, and we have too. And as Philip said, or as Bucket said, the rat tests are really hard to get by. You go on the websites, they are completely out of stock. You call chemists, out of stock. You call Woolworths and Coles, they're out of stock in our area. So it's kind of, and they've closed the PCR testing site. So it's kind of like, the only person I see handling this is Mark McGowan from WA.
Well, those well, you talk about the hospitals, or you talk about the drive-through, the PCR. Is that what you're
The
referring to?
drive-throughs, I'm not talking about the drive-throughs. I'm talking about where you stand in line and wait for hours and hours
That's
and
a
hours.
PCR test.
Yeah.
So the
Right.
public
Okay.
does
No.
not-
All right. Okay. Because I get confused with the terms of that stuff. But yeah, but Mark McGowan is definitely handling this better. But I do fear, one thing with Mark McGowan, like when all these other states get themselves cleared up and Western Australia decides, okay, we're going to drop it, all these other states are going to be fine, and then Western Australia is going to be hit. They're going to be smashed. That's what I fear. Western Australia will eventually get smashed by this. To be quite fair, to be quite honest, they've had, what is it, 100 and in total. I'm looking from the 30th of December, right? That was when they've had daily cases since the 30th of December. They've had 107. That's between the 30th and also the 12th of January. So they're handling this a lot better than all the other states are. Mark McGowan is handling this a lot better. And like I said, when it comes down to the federal election in 2022, it's going to be Western Australia. If it's going to be Western Australia that decides this election, Scott Morrison is going to be in the world of pain, because I think what's going to happen is the Labor Party are going to target the marginals, which is what you do. You target the marginal seats, and you're going to see a lot of swings, and you're going to see a bad night for Mr. Morrison. Unfortunately, I know he's trying hard to do it, but it's coming off. When you see it on TV, it's just not coming off well. For all these good intentions, they're not coming off well. But as far as who's handling this thing better, it's definitely Mark McGowan.
Well, I have to. It's kind of interesting because, it's interesting what will it come down to when it comes to the premiers, because it's definitely going to come down to, okay, who allowed us to basically make money when we were in a pandemic, and who actually kept us safe during the pandemic, and what do you value more? Do you value your jobs more, or do you value safety more? And Perrottet doesn't want to be the one to say that I lost you your jobs. But at the same time, he also wants to say that I kept you safe. And unfortunately, that hasn't been true. So his whole career is pretty much based off, I gave Australia's freedom back. But as far as keeping people safe, he hasn't actually, successfully done that. And like Morrison, they will ask Morrison, how have you kept Australia safe, and how have you kept Australian jobs? And he won't know what to say. I wouldn't even be surprised if Morrison retires and the torch just gets given to someone else in the Liberal Party. I wouldn't be surprised. Okay. I can't see Morrison winning this election at all.
Okay, here's a random question I'd like to throw out there before we ask the third question. And that question I'm thinking of right now is, what will be left of Scott Morrison's legacy? What will his legacy be, and how will it be written, and how will it sound when he formally retires and becomes, as we will soon call him, former Prime Minister Scott Morrison? What will his legacy be, and how will it sound? What will be written about him?
I think one of the things that Scott Morrison did do really, really well was he raised the Centrelink pensions by about $100. And I remember when basically anyone that had, I think it was what's the workers one? The one where you're like the JobKeeper.
Yeah, the
So
JobKeeper.
JobKeeper was like $1,000. And Job Seeker was, I think, $800 or something.
So 1,002.
Or 1,000, yeah. So he actually raised it higher than any prime minister in Australia's history. And then, after a while, he lowered it again. But I think if he's banking on anything, that's what he'll be banking his legacy on, which is raising the raising the essential link allowance, wage, if you will, or benefit, I should really say. But the problem is that Scott Morrison is pretty much known for his negligence, and even if it isn't directly a prime minister's job to do something which is clearly a state job, at least he should at least sound or act like he's doing something right instead of just not caring. And I think if that's his legacy is, I don't care. I'm just going to go to the cricket or a Sharks game because I simply don't care.
I think his legacy is going to be, I don't hold a hose. Not my problem. It's the ministers and the state premier's problems. It's the government's problem. I don't control it. His legacy is, may God forgive me for saying this. Again, I'm not here to offend or upset anyone. This is just an opinion. But we have a Trumpian like prime minister. And it's sort of like, sometimes I find it hard to express myself because it's sort of like, oh my God, who is this person and why isn't he helping? Like when it comes to, say, for example, the rats test, and you can't get them anywhere, and you're closing down PCR testing clinics, walk-in testing clinics, not drive-throughs, because, as I do admit, doctors and nurses are becoming overwhelmed with the amount of people they have to test and the swabbing and whatnot.
But there's an easy way to solve that.
There's an easy way to solve it,
and that's to employ more people.
No, not just that, but to make the rat test free. So his legacy is going to be one that's, I don't hold a hose. What do you think?
First of all, I can imagine the collective rolling of eyes when you mention the word Trumpism. Yeah, that, to be honest, I don't buy into that at all, because you're just looking for an excuse to link it to Donald Trump. I mean, this is what MSNBC have been doing. Every time that there's something going wrong with Joe Biden's presidency, they somehow link it to Donald Trump. That is, to be honest, that is absolute crap. Don't get me wrong. I liked it, but having a trumpet, but saying a Trumpism line just to throw that in is garbage, to be honest. Now, his legacy, Scott Morrison's legacy, to what people have been seeing throughout this pandemic would be like he trying to instruct the states to the way to handle the pandemic, and the state governing bodies are pretty much, no, we're not doing it your way, we're doing it our way. And the only way that's actually worked, unfortunately, is McGowan. The other way is if all the other state premiers had their way and they didn't do it the way that Scott Morrison had asked these guys to do it, because I think there's only Mark McGowan that hasn't done it that way. If they did it their own way, I don't believe that we'll be in this situation as we are right now. But if I don't believe we'd be in that situation, we would be in the same situation that Western Australia is in right now, and that's a pretty damn good situation. But I don't think these guys have really thought this through, and that's going to be his legacy. His legacy is going to be like, he cannot control the state premiers. He's been trying to get the state premiers to go along with what he's saying, and the state premiers are going, yeah, okay, thanks for your opinion. Now see you at the bottom of a river.
Well, if you really want my honest opinion about, like, not just his prime ministership, but his entire career, I mean, his entire career has been based upon locking people up. I mean, he was the foreign minister in charge of putting people in Manus Island before he was prime minister. Like he was, he likes to lock people up and give away lots of money. That's basically been his entire career, giving away lots of money and locking people up. And if you look at how our country has basically suffered with COVID, what was the first thing Scott Morrison did? He basically put us all under house arrest. And that's indicative of his entire career. And now,
sorry to interrupt, but I think the first time he locked us down, right, it was Scott Morrison that decided to lock all the states down while they tried to figure out a way out of this. The second time and the third time was not Scott Morrison's idea. The second time, the third time, and all those other times were state ideas. So Scott Morrison was, I think, responsible for the first one, not the rest of them.
Yes, but what I'm saying is because whilst he was being foreign minister, he locked up a lot of people from overseas and put them in Manus Island or put us in Christmas Island. That was basically his, like 90% of his career. It's only when he's been Prime Minister of Australia that he's had other policies, but it's almost like, I don't have to say this because, you know, I don't want to compare Tony Abbott with Scott Morrison because I kind of think they're two different prime ministers. But if you kind of look at the level of work, he's only done a little bit more than Tony Abbott. Tony Abbott did fuck all, excuse my language. But then again, Scott Morrison has only done a little bit more than Tony Abbott, which I don't think is good enough. The Liberal Party have plenty of good prime ministers and ministers within their party that could probably better lead Australia. And I just think that the one legacy that he's going to leave behind is just negligence. Sadly, I wish it was something better, but it's not. And I think he's just a negligent prime minister.
Again, we're not here to offend or upset or anger anybody. It's just an opinion that what we see about our prime minister. I mean, it's come to be a sad one, really. You know, thinking ahead, going to where we are now to where we're heading in the future. So here's my next question. Is challenging Scott Morrison's authority realistic?
I think it is. I think it is because I think we need to challenge all of our ministers' authority because that's how we keep them in line. If we didn't challenge any of our ministers' behavior, then they'd be doing whatever they like. This is why we have, what do you call it? Internal Affairs or ICAC powers to ensure that ministers stay in line. I reckon we probably do need a federal level ICAC or something like a federal level ICAC. But I'm not sure if that would ever become a thing because federal ministers don't actually like to be investigated. But I think it is important to really judge and see what are the pros and cons of the prime minister in power, because that's why we live in a democracy. Otherwise, what's the point of a democracy if you don't question the things that they do?
What do you think, Leon?
I think we'll only start seeing politicians, especially from the LNP. I think we'll start seeing members from the LNP start openly challenging Scott Morrison's position on things when the federal election is announced, and these federal members who are going to be in this election, they'll be looking at trying to save their own seat, quite frankly, and that's why you'll see them openly start to challenge Scott Morrison, because I think they might be able to get some of their people back. I think we're going to see a lot of federal members start doing that. Once you start seeing that, Scott Morrison's probably going to be pissing the wind straight after the election, and he'd probably have to step down, and he'll have to bring someone else in to, be the opposition leader. I think that's what we will see if an election's being called, and you'll see federal members start openly challenging Scott Morrison's position on things. That's when you know.
See, the thing is, Victoria's premier, Daniel Andrews.
Daniel Andrews, the federal. I think it's the state premier, I believe.
Yeah, state premier. He's Labor, but I don't see him being voted in. So if he doesn't win the seat, I could see Melbourne being potentially a Liberal seat, or it might actually be a Green seat.
Or maybe another Labor
Or,
person.
I don't see it being a Labor. I honestly don't see them ever getting a Labor government for a while because of Dan Andrews, because a lot of people don't like Dan Andrews.
I think you'll find South Australia is more a Greens state than Victoria, I believe. Even if say Daniel Andrews takes himself to the election, he loses his seat. Well, it would take. I think it would take a swing of about 20 or 30%. You'd need a 20% swing against Daniel Andrews just to roll him or something like that, and that is going to be hard to do. So I think the one thing that the LNP, if the LNP want to try and take Victoria or take Daniel Andrews down, is they need to run that line. Is Victoria, like, is, Disneyland's the happiest place on earth. Victoria is the most lockdown place on earth. That's how you go. That's how you would target Victorian seats. If you wanted the LNP to really make a run for Victoria, but again, it's going to come down to Western Australia.
I'm not going to answer the question I just asked because I think you two answered it perfectly, and I wouldn't know how to follow that. So the next question I have in mind is, should Scott Morrison call an early election? I'm going to go first. I think he should. I think let's just get it over and done with, because if he calls an early election, at least, because we're in a pandemic, one, it would be safe, because how would they, this is the thing, if he calls an early election, how are they going to control people standing in line at different venues about to vote? Because usually pre-pandemic days, pre-COVID days, you had people, one person behind the other. So now if people vote and he calls an early election, how are you going to space out the next person? Are you going to put a chair between them? Or are you going to put what do you call them, those banners between them or something, just so they're isolated or something like that? Will he call an early election? I truly hope so. I believe he will.
Okay, so I think what you're talking about there is how people vote. So
I'm saying, will he call an early election?
Look, if he's smart, he won't, because if he wants to keep his seat for as long as possible, did I say hospital?
Yeah.
For as long as hospital. I said it again, as possible.
Well, you're 0-2 so far.
If he wants to keep his seat for as long as there's hospitals and possible, he basically won't call an early election. There is no way in hell he will call an early election. And the reason for that is that he knows he will lose. And the Liberal Party probably know he's probably going to lose. So unless he early retires, which he knows he's not going to do, he's not going to do it. I'm sure that there would be plenty of time to go on a campaign trail or something like that up until the actual election, but there's no way right now that he's going to spend money to go on a campaign trail right during the worst pandemic, where people are pretty much locked inside their homes.
I mean, I'm following all these members of parliament people on Facebook, and they're putting up all this stuff, and they're saying the federal election could be in May, between March and May. But the thing is, they're saying that Scott Morrison could possibly call an early election. I'm going to throw the ball in your court, Leon. Should the Prime Minister call an early election, yes or no?
No, you got Buckley's chance of him calling an early election, because he's on the nose right now with the Australian people, especially the way he's handled certain things, like you said, like the pandemic. Now, what I do understand is he plans to hold the budget on the 29th of March, which is another early budget for some reason. That would leave only 3 possible days to call an election, and that'd be the 7th, 14th, and 21st of May. Because the days after that would be like during Easter and Anzac Day long weekend. So you don't call it during Easter, and you don't call it during Anzac Day long weekend. So that would leave the 7th of May, 14th of May, or the 21st of May. Now, as I understand, he could not hold it any later. He could not call the election any later than the 21st of May. So he's got that window in May. So if I was him, I would hold it off as long as possible. I would call it on, say, the 21st of May, because that way you could hold it right to the end.
But if he does call on the 21st of May, here's another random question. If he is going to call it on the 21st of May, for example, how are they going to separate the people? I mean,
Well, that's very
I
easy.
mean, sure, there's iVote, there's voting online, but also how would they separate people standing in line? Because you have pre-pandemic days, you had people voting behind each other. How are you going to separate voters? I mean, how's that going to work?
Okay, well, the way that I can see it working is how you mentioned it, iVote, or they extend the period of voting to go for longer to take into account that the computers that they have, or the mainframe that they have, don't crash. So I can see iVote as maybe the main way that everyone's going to vote, because going into a little kindergarten to go and vote may not be even a possibility whilst everyone's in a pandemic, depending on what state you're actually in. WA probably have a greater chance of doing that because they don't have many people in COVID right now. But, states like Melbourne, New South Wales, Queensland, Tasmania, it's probably easier if everyone just does it online during an extended period of time, just so the system won't crash. And I think that's just the way that everyone's basically heading, to be perfectly honest.
Because to be honest, I mean, sure, you have the iVote, which would be a much better solution, but there are people that actually, because say voting opens at 7 o'clock in the morning and goes, and the last vote is at 6 p.m. before they count, and they close the doors at 6, before they sit down and they actually count the votes one by one by one by one. And sure, as I said, iVote's an easier solution, but how would you, if people are coming to stand in line wearing a mask in the heat, autumn in the heat, and they're still wearing a mask, how are you gonna separate people?
Well, I mean, you just separate people during the normal way, which is do your average 1.5, but then that would take for ages. And, humans are naturally impatient. So I think we're just going to gravitate towards iVote. And literally the 4 options that you have in order to vote on iVote, which is A, I'm too sick to actually vote, or B, my voting station is in another area. There's still perfectly legal reasons to not do a postal vote. And you know what, we're just heading towards, like I said, we're heading towards that way of doing electronic voting, because that is literally the safest way that you can vote without actually getting a fine. But if you were to go in, well, to be honest, we used to live in Penrith, right? And I used to love voting because I used to be able to go in, and I loved being a part of the voting scene. And then what happened was Penrith took away the sausage sizzle, and then it started to suck. And we got vegan sausage rolls instead. And that was stupid. It was like, no sausage sizzle. No sausage sizzle.
Democracy sausage, no democracy sausage, mate. You just lost my vote altogether, man. Whoever Penrith, you just lost my vote altogether. Now, kind of crossed out where we were. I've just drawn a blank, actually, to be honest. I've drawn a blank. My head's just gone blank of what you guys were saying. Can you guys refresh my memory? Apart from the democracy sausage.
What I was trying to say is that when he calls the election, as I said, iVote is a safe way of doing it. But if people do insist on lining up, it's going to be hard because all of us are going to be wearing our masks for a very, 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 very long time.
All right, so that's it. iVote, that's it.
How would you separate the Australian public instead of standing behind each other one by one?
The answer is
how how would you separate? Do you put a chair in between the person?
No,
or-
you would just do your normal 1.5, which is you just basically stay away from people. And I think that's pretty much ingrained into people's minds already. Or you vote online, which is just much simpler. Okay, I
Now,
voted online. It's a lot easier.
when did you vote online last? At the council elections?
So the council election. That's right.
Yeah, I remember hearing that the iVote machines crashed or something like that, which meant people couldn't vote. And I think when it comes to iVoting, I think you only have until like 1 o'clock or something to do your iVote. That's why you need to get out there and just go to your school or your council or your hall or whatever to get out there and vote. The way that I always did my voting was I went out there first thing in the morning. You know, there was a small crowd. There wasn't a big of a crowd because the longer it goes, the longer you wait. Say if you're going in the middle of the day, the longer that snake line's going to be. And I think the chairs wasn't such a bad idea that you mentioned, Kat, because I did remember seeing, you know, when we had that first lockdown and there was chairs and, you know, things lined up. I don't know if you remember this, Buckets. I'm not sure if you did. It was on the news one time where there was chairs lined up down the street. And basically you guys were playing musical chairs. When the person got seen, like they moved to the next seat down. So I think that was what was going on, if I remember right. But that was during, I think, the first lockdown. But I think they would be able to do the 1.5, but they're going to have to do a really, really wild snake line. You know, so it would be, instead of going like around the world like it would normally be, I think you'd have to have it, you know, basically a real, you know, zigzag kind of snake trail or something, but it's got to be 1.5. That's the thing.
Here's a question. Here's a doozy of a question. Say when it comes to the Liberal National Party, if they won, for example, who would be nominated to take Scott Morrison's place if he loses to another Liberal National Party leader?
It would be Barnaby Joyce for sure. Barnaby Joyce would take his place for sure. I don't know who it would be other than Barnaby Joyce. I don't see Joe Hockey doing it anytime soon. And John Howard isn't going to become Prime Minister again as much as he'd want to. But yeah, my money would most likely be on Barnaby Joyce. Who would your money be on?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards you. I think the most obvious choice would be Barnaby Joyce because he's got that profile. He speaks Aussies. He doesn't try to speak he doesn't try to do the clever wordplay and stuff like that. He's one of those down-to-earth speaking people. Another choice I would toss in there would be Peter Dutton, even though he had a couple of cracks at Malcolm Turnbull and didn't get him. It didn't get him twice. But I wouldn't rule out Peter Dutton right now. But I wouldn't rule him out. But I would say Barnaby Joyce would be the favorite because people know him. People know he's a straight talker. He doesn't use weasel words. He will just call it like it is. That's that. My money's with you guys. If it was going to go to anybody, it'd be Barnaby Joyce. Wouldn't we have a fun 3 years? Wouldn't a fun 3 years that'll be because, you know, nobody talks like Barnaby Joyce does these days. Everybody's careful what they say. He does not give a rat's what you think of him. He will tell it like it is.
Here's the next question. And I'm not going to say if, but I will say when.
Okay, go on.
When the opposition leader, Anthony Albanese, wins the election of 2020.
That's assuming he wins.
When he wins and he becomes our Prime Minister, who is going to be his opposition leader? Or who will be the opposition leader?
Okay, but that's assuming that Barnaby Joyce wins. And we don't even know that. And anything can happen on the election trail. But assuming that he wins, as popular as he is right now, let's see, I could probably go with who's that nice Chinese lady?
Penny Wong.
Yeah, Penny Wong. Yeah, probably Penny Wong.
But she's a Labor person as well.
Yeah, she's a Labor senator right now.
Yeah, so I could probably see her based off based off the current political climate.
You mean
Sure.
you mean her being the deputy? You think Penny Wong could be the deputy?
Yeah,
When-
Penny Wong being the deputy.
Not if, but when
Deputy leader. Deputy leader.
Not if, but when Anthony Albanese wins the prime ministership.
So you're saying who would be the Liberal?
Who would be the opposition leader? Because currently you have Scott Morrison's prime minister and Anthony Albanese is the opposition leader.
Okay, well,
So if
my
he-
answer would still be the
if
same,
or
which is
when-
Barnaby Joyce.
If
Barnaby
he
Joyce
wins,
would be the opposition leader. It's not
So
going to
when
be.
he
Okay, so if
When?
if
Anthony Albanese.
Anthony Albanese were to win, Barnaby Joyce would definitely be the opposition leader, because I can basically see the rest of his the Liberal Party just turning on the current PM we have now. So they're not going to want to have Scott Morrison in power for much longer. They're going to want to have Barnaby Joyce. They just can't do it now because it's a bit iffy at the moment, but they'll wait till he's lost all his power before they switch leaders. I don't see Scott Morrison being any sort of leader or even trying to go for a next election anytime soon. So, but I definitely see the entire Liberal Party being backed by Barnaby Joyce, sorry, the entire Liberal Party backing Barnaby Joyce. But I don't see the entire Liberal Party backing Scott Morrison unless they get something out of it.
Good question.
I got a spin for you. I got hang on. I got a spin question for you, right? We'll just speak on that, right? Say just for spin purposes, what if Anthony Albanese loses the unlosable election the same way that Bill Shorten lost the unlosable election last time? I got one for you. Who would be the opposition leader then? Because if Albanese was to lose, who would be the leader? You couldn't have Bill Shorten again, surely. You wouldn't go back to Bill Shorten.
No one's going to go back to Bill Shorten again, because no one trusts Bill Shorten. No one likes Bill Shorten. Okay? I'm a Labor person, but even I hate Bill Shorten. I think he's.
You wouldn't go to Kevin Rudd.
Well, Kevin, the thing is,
he'd be on the toilet door in the Parliament. Same with Julia Gillard.
Kevin Rudd would even want to do it at all anyway.
Here's what I think. I think that, given the circumstances, Mr. Rudd, who I admire very, very much, and I follow on Facebook and Instagram, but I don't know if, in my dreams, if he would come back, it would be pretty historical. Not hilarious, historical, because at the age he is now and his retirement, I don't know. Would it be?
My problem is he has an agenda right now, and his agenda is going after Murdoch media. He has been going after Murdoch media for over a year now. No matter what it is, he has been going after Murdoch media. So I can't see Kevin Rudd potentially coming back, because if he comes back, he's already got his agenda lined up, and he's going to focus on Murdoch.
Well, the thing is about one of the things that Kevin Rudd was really afraid of was Murdoch and his media. And Murdoch brought down prime ministers. It's ironic that the Murdoch media haven't really brought down Scott Morrison when there's ample opportunity for them to do it. But yeah, I don't see Kevin Rudd coming back purely because he just doesn't want to. I think he has.
I would like to see him challenge.
I know you want to, but I don't see him doing it, because I think he's got more power being a protester than he did when he was a prime minister.
I tend to agree with Buckets. Yeah.
I hope if our former prime minister does see this, former Prime Minister Rudd, if you haven't watched this, I am a staunch supporter.
I'm not talking about him now.
No, but I'm a staunch supporter, and it would be the wildest thing, a bombshell, if he was to actually somehow fit in with this time compared to when he was prime minister. So just think about it. Next question. Let's have a look. How Scott Morrison win over the Australian public if he runs for prime minister again? How would he win the Australian public? And this is, I think, if he if he changes his policies, maybe shows a little, again, I'm not here to offend or upset anybody, it's just my opinion, but a little bit more kindness, a little bit more empathy, a little forward, telling the truth, straight talking, let's get the show on the road, let's fix up Australia, let's heal us all, unite us
So
as
you're
one.
saying is, but he needs to change his image.
He needs to change his image, and he needs to change the way he's been doing things for the last almost 8 years.
I think he needs to change more than his image. Needs to change his policies. I think basically he needs to, I mean, it would be great if you put more money into Centrelink, but I think he basically needs to put more money into allowing for there to be, free PCR tests and also free rat tests, and reinvest money into pop-up PCR tests. If that was the focus, then I could probably see him being a potential leader again. If he lowered taxes, he could potentially get in again. If he tried to invest money into refillable energies, he could again potentially get back in again.
You mean reusable energies? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, so green energies or whatever, or solar energies. So I could see him potentially get in. And if he fixed maybe the employment crisis that we currently have now, I can see him actually being a potential prime minister. But until he can actually fix those problems, I don't actually, his campaign right now is actually piss poor.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm quite appalled with the idea that he's not, not appalled is a word, but I'm not surprised, because he doesn't focus on what's current and what's modern. Like, for example, climate change. We need to put all our energy on climate change. Our world is getting more hotter every day, and we're in summertime right now, and slowly but surely we're going to go into autumn soon, and it's just getting hotter and hotter, and we're having wild, crazy weather. We're having cyclones, we're having freak thunderstorms. I think we need to look at, he needs, again, his image needs to be fixing, because we need to work on climate change, and climate change is no joke.
Yeah, but the problem with climate change is that, the thing about climate change is that it can't really be fixed per se. And I'm all for green technologies. Don't get me wrong. But climate change can't really technically be fixed. It could be minimized, but it can't really be fixed, because our world is, unless we shut down all the coal mines that are in Australia, and then just go back to or concentrate on entirely renewable energies, then we're always going to have climate change. It's just always going to be there. But a realistic policy would be something to do with employment, maybe or a lowering of taxes, or even an increase of Centrelink, or an increase of health supplies. That's the kind of things that would actually get him voted in. And if he concentrates on those things, there might be a chance that he could actually get voted in again. Now, but he has to find the balance between people that desperately want booster shots or vaccines and people that don't. And I think he's been kind of doing that sort of in saying, I'm going to try and make this as mandatory as possible, but we won't make it mandatory. So he's been trying to balance between the two groups kind of thing, those that want to take a vaccine and others that do. But in the end, he's going to have to pick a side if he wants to have an actual proper policy that will actually stick within Australia and not just fluff about. If he fluffs about, there is absolutely no way that he will become the Prime Minister of Australia again.
What do you think?
To be honest, there's one thing I don't like. Obviously we know the environment's a big issue right now. We do know that climate change and all that sort of stuff and how we're going to tackle it. The problem I have with all these politicians, promising to do something about it, they're pushing out dates like 2040, 2050. These are dates in the never right now because they're banking that they'll be prime minister and leader for like 20 years. It ain't going to happen. The last person that was prime minister for nearly 20 years was John Howard. And that was about it because he knew he handled it. He handled it right. Well, he handled the best of his ability. But all these guys are talking about, what are we going to do? How are we going to tackle climate change and all that sort of stuff? Right. We can do it with the renewables. We can do all that. We can also do wind farms. We can also do nuclear, but we can also do solar. But right now, everyone's focusing. They're not focusing on the one on multiple fronts. They're only focusing on how we're going to handle, how we're going to shut down. We're going to bring in renewables. Fine. But if you're going to bring in renewables, you're going to have to shut down the old stuff. But you haven't given us any solid word on what we're going to do, how we're going to bring this in. We're just going to shut down the old plants without bringing in new plants, and that'll cause problems, especially during summer when it's really hot. And those people in Victoria, I remember one of their plants, one of their coal-fired plants was shut down. I think it was in Victoria. And they didn't have a backup. So what happened is there was rolling blackouts in Victoria. That's what you need. If you're going to shut down the old stuff to bring in the new stuff for the renewables, you have to build the renewables first before you can shut down the old stuff, right, just to make sure it all works. That's why I would like to see. Renewables, Brian. I would like to see that. I would like to see wind farms. I would like to see that. I would also like to see them try nuclear, see what happens there along with solar, because that way you've got four new fronts there. You've got solar, you've got nuclear, you've got the wind farms, and you also got renewable. So there you go. You got four. Right now we're using maybe maybe using three at the moment, but not using the other three in the way that we should be using it.
Now I'm going to throw this one out to our subscribers and our viewers, current and new. I want to ask you all to leave us some comments on our YouTube page. The question to our subscribers and viewers is, what do you think will happen in the next federal election? When you think about it, to our subscribers and viewers, really think about it and give us your answers, and the best answer will give you a shout out. So what do you think will happen in the next federal election, Buckets?
I think this is the thing, right? I think a lot of people are aiming towards a hung parliament, to be perfectly honest. And that idea is becoming more and more popular. I think Albanese has got a really, really good chance of actually becoming PM. But I also think the idea of a hung parliament is also within our midst. And that's when you've got people like Craig Kelly, who basically, I hate his ads, but Craig Kelly is gaining popularity rather quickly. And so
isn't he with the United Party right now?
Yes, he's joining United Party.
So I think he's gaining popularity now. And I think a lot of other independents are actually gaining popularity as well. So I think either the Labor Party is going to win it, or it'll be a hung parliament, and either the Liberal Party or the Labor Party is going to have to deal with the independents. And I think that's probably what's going to happen in the near future, is that they're going to have to deal with the independents. And that's going to be crazy. That's going to be really, really crazy when that happens. But either it'll just be a straight whitewash where Labor just wins, or it'll be a hung parliament where the Labor Party win some of the seats, but the vast majority of seats are won by the independents. One of those two.
Here's what I'm going to break it down just quickly, and that's all I'm going to say about it. What do I think will happen in the next federal election? I believe, and I think strongly, that it's going to be a massive election, and it's going to be a very tight race, and it's going to come down to I'm going to predict, and I'm predicting this, and I'm going to call it, it's going to come down to the 1% margin. By the hair of my chinny chin.
So you think it's probably going to be a hung parliament?
No, I'm saying between Scott Morrison and the opposition leader, Mr. Anthony Albanese, it's going to be a 1% hair follicle margin where it's going to be so tight between the two.
No way.
Because look at it this way, our Prime Minister still has followers, he still has fans, he still has people supporting him, and he's going to have all his Liberal National Party people voting for him. He's going to have his family voting for him. He's going to have friends voting for him. He's going to have followers voting for him. And when it comes down to the Prime Minister versus opposition leader Anthony Albanese, I'm predicting it and calling it. It's a 1% margin. It's going to be a 1% margin. It's going to be that tight. Tight.
No way. I do not see it as, look, the last election that we had with Scott Morrison, that was within a hair's breadth. Okay, Scott Morrison won by 1 seat. Okay, 1 seat. Okay, this election, it'll either be a hung parliament or a whitewash by the Labor Party. And even though Melbourne probably won't want a Labor Party or a Labor seat, they probably won't want to deal with Dan Andrews. I can definitely see that either being a left-wing seat or a United Party seat or an independent seat. They won't want to deal with the Liberal Party, I don't think. But
what do you think?
I don't see it. You'll either get a hung parliament or it'll be a whitewash Labor Party win.
What do you think?
Well, the thing is, right, you cannot win a federal election unless you're the preferred prime minister. Anthony Albanese at this stage is not the preferred prime minister.
Oh, yes, he
now,
is.
no, he's not.
Well, hang on.
You think he is. You think he is, but he ain't. You check it out. He's not. Anthony Albanese is not the preferred prime minister right now. Scott Morrison is. However, that is coming down bits and pieces. I can't wait to see the first news poll to come through since the Omicron situation. So that will probably give us a fair indication of where it's going. But then again, news poll was wrong about the last election. News poll pretty much said the ALP was gonna romp it in, and that didn't happen. That went the other way. Now, I believe what will need to happen is, right, Scott Morrison is going to have to go to Melbourne. He's going to have to do it. He's going to have to do all his stuff in Melbourne this time around. He went to Tasmania the last time around, and that was effective because you don't win the election if you don't win both seats in Tasmania. I can't remember. I think one of them was Bass. I can't remember the other one. Yeah, I'm stretched. I'm stretched on what seats they were. If somebody can correct me, that's fine. And I will appreciate it. But you need to win. You need to win Tasmania. If you don't win both seats in Tasmania, you got a problem. And that's what the LNP did at the last election. But I think they're going to have to go to Victoria this time around, because the only thing that the LNP can possibly run on is the fact that Daniel Andrews locked Victoria down for such a long period of time. Victoria became the most locked down state on earth, and also he's going to have to play on that death card, because under Daniel Andrews, this was what happened. You had all these deaths as well.
I think
you can't go to Western Australia and target COVID there, because they've done better than anybody else. They're going to go. I think it is ultimately going to go down to Western Australia, which means we're not going to have a result until maybe early Sunday morning, maybe, or mid Sunday morning.
The thing is about Tasmania is a typical Liberal seat anyway. A lot of the time, because they've got a lot of businesses in Tasmania, not to say that there aren't businesses in every other state, but they, like, the Liberal Party is really, really popular in Tasmania. And they're going to be just as popular in Melbourne, thanks to Dan Andrews making the Labor Party extremely unpopular. So I think with Tasmania and Victoria, the Liberal Party have pretty much won both those two states. New South Wales could go either way. It could go either way, to be perfectly honest, even though Albanese is popular. But Queensland will probably stay Labor. But they're going to have to work really, 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 really hard to win over WA, because if they don't, they've lost the election.
Last question. Let's finish it up. Who do you think will win? My answer is our next Prime Minister of 2022. It'll be the opposition leader, Mr. Anthony Albanese. Go.
Yeah, look, I think it's probably going to be Albanese as well, due to the fact that the Liberal Party have basically shown themselves to be negligent. And I think the biggest asset that the Liberal Party actually had was Gladys, and they got rid of Gladys. So, well, the ICAT got rid of Gladys, but the biggest asset, the best premier that New South Wales had was Gladys, and we got rid of her. So I think that negligence just seems to be a theme that seems to follow the Liberal Party around everywhere it goes. So I definitely think Labor's just going to win it, or it's going to be a hung parliament.
What do you think?
To be honest, I hope it's not a hung parliament, because the hung parliament got us Julia Gillard, and B, we got that line that there'll be no carbon tax under a government I lead. And then after she signed a deal with the Greens, within a couple of weeks later, the truth is a carbon tax. Boom. That was the end of her. And it only took her 2 months. It took 2 months for the hung parliament to come undone. But when she decided that she was going to step down, or she was going to step down because of Kevin Rudd or whatever, and then they switched again, those independents decided to call time on their own. That was Tony Windsor, Rob Oakeshott. I believe those were two of the main independents there. But
in it as well, yeah, that was scary when she became popular.
So, but just quickly, who do you think will win?
Well, like I said, to be honest, I hope it's not a hung parliament. Let's see. At the way things are going at the moment, you would say that Anthony Albanese would be in the box seat to win the election. But the problem is, you're going to have to start answering questions like if they're going to make all these promises, they're going to have to answer how they're going to pay for it, because that's what happened with Bill Shorten. He made a lot of big promises and he couldn't add them up. He could not price them because he could not put a tag on them. And that's what done Bill Shorten in. So Anthony Albanese would need to learn the mistakes of Bill Shorten, learn to not make the mistakes of Bill Shorten if he was to become the Prime Minister of Australia. But right now, I'd say he's in the box seat right now. And just for the record, for the House of Representatives, the election result last federal election, this is just the House of Representatives, by the way. The LNPs ended up with 77 seats. The Labor Party ended up with 68. The Greens had 1. The Katter Party had 1. The Centre Alliance had 1, and that was Mayo. And the Independents had 3 seats. So that was the that was the House of Representatives. The Liberal and that ended up with 77 to 68. So they ended up with 9 extra seats, not 1.
Well, there you go. Oh, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please don't forget to subscribe and push that notification bell, and give us some likes and some love, and leave some comments. Let us know what you think and who you think will win the next federal election. And we hope you enjoyed our podcast. We will see you hopefully next Wednesday with another fun topic. Thank you for joining us tonight for this special event. Thanks, Leon. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
There he is.